Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am very excited to start the first conversation of the series In the Know with our own chapter director, Minda Berbeco. And SF Bay Chapter Sierra Club, for those of you who don't know, so Minda has been director of the chapter for about last 4 years, right, Minda?
That's right.
Yeah, I remember the interview committee raving about this one candidate that they were just hoping that it will accept the offer. And now after, I have goosebumps. After working with Minda for almost 4 years and last 3 months, we've been really working very closely. I can understand why people were so excited. And more I learn about Minda, the more I want to know about her and want to learn from her, most importantly. So so Minda went to Carnegie Mellon, right, University to get her psychology degree, which is my favorite. I want to know more about that. And then she switched to biology degree at Tufts University, which, mind you, Tufts, to get in, it's about 13, 14 acceptance rates. Need to be, I think you need to be all A's and like at the top of your class to get into Tufts. So that in itself is incredibly impressive. So I also want to know a little bit more about that, the discipline and the knowledge that it takes. And then also before Minda, well, you were at Davis also doing your postgraduate, so on the climate change. And before joining the club, Minda was programs and policy director at the, correct me if I'm misname it, National Center for Science Education.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
So, and there she led forgive me, my, foreign accent. At the same time, I'll rephrase it, 4 different programs, which were pretty big programs. So I want to also know how you managed and what did you learn. And also Minda was mentoring children in West Oakland. So just a compilation of experience, and why I'm so also excited that I'm observing Minda's leadership at the chapter, and it just amazes me that the staff seem to be grounded, they seem to like each other, operate at their best, and sort of even in the times like now, we're all going through, Minda is always composed, always grounded, and the staff also, I think, feels supported. So anyway, without further ado.
That was quite the introduction. Thank you.
Well, it was an easy introduction, definitely. I mean, I didn't mention a lot of things, and I want to mention further down in our conversation that stood out to me. I'm like, oh, I want to ask about that. So, a lot of things that we sort of come from childhood, and you learn psychology, so you probably know that also.
True.
So I want to learn a little bit about your childhood, and I don't, know much. So
Sure.
You can share some exciting moments that sort of defined you and your choices in life. That would be great.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. It's actually, so thank you so much for letting me be your first interviewee. It's like quite the honor. So I'm very excited, and it's actually rare that I get to talk about this stuff with people. So it's kind of neat to be asked. So thank you. So I grew up in a suburb outside of Boston, and it's interesting because I wasn't raised in a family that was really into the outdoors. It was actually quite the opposite. My dad was a small business owner and had a series of businesses throughout his career. And my mom was an artist. And so I actually spent a lot of time in the arts, being exposed to lots of different types of artists and types of engagement with the arts, whether it was plays or music. Certainly got my hands dirty a lot. you know, growing up, I assumed that everybody had a kiln in their basement, and it turns out that that's not.
Basement, you said?
What's that?
What is in the basement?
Oh, a kiln, right? For cooking your pottery. Yeah, I just assumed that everybody had that. But no, that's actually what artists have. And so my mom was an artist, you know, and I spent a lot of time in galleries and in museums, and, you know, really had like a lot of exposure from the arts. And it's interesting because my brothers and I, none of us are artists now, but I think we all have like this incredible appreciation for the arts that I'm really grateful for. But one thing that was really common where I grew up was to send your kids away to summer camp. And I feel like it's really different now because I have kids, and I talk to other parents, and their kids will go to summer camp for like a weekend or a week, or you'll go to a family camp, so the whole family goes. But when I was growing up, you know, in the 80s in New England, it was not unusual to send your kids away to the woods for the entire summer. And
yeah, where were you growing up?
So I was growing up right outside of Boston, but the summer camp I went to was in New Hampshire, and it was very, you know, rustic. So we were on platform tents, you know, like our bathroom was very rustic, you know, and so I would sort of enter the summer as this suburban kid, and I'd sort of exit the summer as sort of this unshowered wild child. You know, I remember distinctly walking through the woods by the end of the summer barefoot, and this is, you know, pine cones and rocks, like this isn't soft terrain. But that was kind of the, like, you know, completely covered head to toe by the end of the summer with mosquito and spider bites, and the full experience of being in the outdoors. And that was, you know, I started going to camp when I was like 7 years old. So really early formative experiences. And now that I have kids, I'm like, I'm not sure I would send them, I'm not sure I'd send them quite so young. But you know, I had all these benefits associated with it that I still think of now. And something that I think people still talk about now is really trying to connect kids with nature. You know, like, what if kids had the opportunity to just kind of sit and watch animals and watch, you know, flowers bloom and that sort of thing. And I really do feel like I got that, you know, in my experience, because I knew that in August, every day, like clockwork, at 4 o'clock, there would be a thunderstorm, you know, and like you could hear it coming from a distance and that sort of thing. And I still remember that. And I still remember, you know, like going through the woods and just being terrified of the pond because it had leeches, you know, all those kinds of things that, I don't know. I just
previous boys that were doing something.
No, I just, and actually, interestingly enough, I met my now husband at camp too. So I think it really connected with me with like nature. So I went on to do many other things, but that was the thing that I think I ended up coming back to because of my experiences there.
Well, it's interesting that you're saying that all of those experiences, including leeches, which is not very, everybody who knows, that, you know, some people would go to nature and they sort of like, I don't want to do that. but it's great that you actually defined you in the opposite direction, that you became a nature lover, if I understand that correctly.
Leeches and all, the whole thing.
And barefoot in the woods. Oh my God, this is a little rough.
Well, I'm curious for you, Olga, did you have a similar like interaction with nature when you were young?
Oh boy. Yes, I mean, I grew up in Russia, and I grew up in St. Petersburg, Russia, which is a big city, in the apartments. but my grandmother was who I really am grateful for. I mean, she's an amazing inspiration in my life, and really, you know, I became who I am because of her, and the best parts of me, I would say, because of her. So she was an avid gardener and also berry and mushroom picker, and it's like, you know, and when you go into the country, and we had a summer house, you step outside of the gate and it's wilderness. I mean, with moose and bear and, you know, and hedgehog. It's like, you know, it's wilderness. So you're walking everywhere in a small trail. So, and I think I went to the woods with my grandmother first time when I was like 3 or something. So I definitely I have that love and appreciation and sort of feel for nature since early on. So that's definitely defined me for sure. So thank you for sharing. That's incredible. So how did you go to from arts and from nature to psychology, and like what was the thought process and what was the interest?
You know, it's a great question. I've always been really interested in people, and how people think, you know, and definitely helping people. And at the time I had a lot of interest in sort of helping people work through their problems and that sort of thing. And, you know, and so I went to Carnegie Mellon. I got my BS in psychology. And it was kind of a cool time to be there because, of course, Carnegie Mellon is probably most known for its engineering school. And so, you know, getting a bachelor's of science there did require quite a bit of interaction with, you know, engineering and computer programming and, you know, and the sciences as well. So that was kind of nice for me because it wasn't something that I thought I would be particularly good at, and it really pushed me in that direction. But it was also kind of cool too because, you know, I would be going to class and I'd run into this like robot that was, you know, like one of these kind of early, almost like a early Roomba or something like that was being developed at the time, you know, at Carnegie Mellon. So you'd sort of run, and this one in particular, they programmed to go buy coffee for the researchers who were making it, you know, and it's kind of a funny thing.
Right?
Yeah, robot, what would I do? So, and it was really kind of cute because it would go around on the first floor and it would bump into things and say, oh, excuse me, and then it would kind of roll around and go on to the next thing. But it was kind of a cool time to be at a place like Carnegie Mellon because, you know, it was, you know, my junior year was the first time that we signed up for, or maybe senior year, first time we signed up for classes online. And that was like this big, like, revolution. But because of that, it actually, I feel like it really helped me push me to try new technologies that I maybe wouldn't feel comfortable with, and actually has given me sort of a lifelong appreciation for technologies, but then also like not being afraid of them and not being like, always sort of being like, okay, that looks tricky in some fashion, but let's try to see if we can figure it out. And so I think in some ways, you know, when I applied and decided to go there, I don't think I appreciated that would be one of the great outcomes of going there. But it was, and it really kind of expanded my brain capacity. Yeah. So
which year was that you were there? Because it's relevant, you know, now technology.
I know. I graduated in 2000, in the year 2000.
2000. Oh, wow. So that was, I mean, wow. I don't want to name the number, how long ago it was.
I don't want to age myself.
But wow, that's impressive. You know, back then doing that technology, that's.
I know, no, you know, it's stuff like now where you're like, yeah, okay, the internet. But you know, it was sort of different. It was a different scene back then. So, yeah, Yeah, it was neat.
And so that technology and a combination, of psychology, technology, which is fascinating. What was sort of the three major things that you took away from that program? And also, well, let's leave it at that for now, and then I want to, go to Tufts.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, that's an interesting question. I wouldn't even say it was three things. I think it was just one big thing, which was, not to be afraid to try new things, and not like diminishing what your capabilities could potentially are. So I think throughout my life, and I think this happens to everybody throughout everyone's life, people will always say, "Oh, that's going to be really hard. That's going to be hard for you." And yes, things are really hard. Yeah, that's true. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to do it. And I think when people say that, they're trying to suggest it's going to be too hard. And I think the only person who is really set to determine that is you. You're the judge of that. And I think that I think maybe going into college, I felt that a lot, like, oh, this is going to be too hard for me. And that was a school where they were like, well, then, you shouldn't be here. And I was like, well, I want to be here. So then it was like, okay, well, then you have to do it. And it was like, okay. So I think that's a great lesson in life, is that things are going to be hard. You should still try to do it.
Well, you know what, actually, it's interesting. I learned something through my sort of, many careers and many projects. I was like, I'm very proud of that coming up. That's like, nothing is as difficult as you think it will be, and nothing takes as little time as you think it's going to take.
I think that's very true.
A little mantra that I have. So prepare.
So I actually wanted to ask you about your veterinary degree, because of course in the US, and I don't know if this is the same where you got your degree, but in the US, veterinary schools are one of the most competitive to get into, and even more so than medical school, and are extraordinarily challenging. And so anytime I actually meet somebody with a veterinary degree, I am incredibly impressed, because it's not like you're just learning about how to take care of, one, like a human, right? You are doing comparative anatomy, and animals are different in so many different ways and have so many different issues. So I don't know if you'd be willing to just share a little bit about that, because I think it's highly impressive.
Well, thank you, Minda. I mean, it's something. It's a little bit, from my past life. Although when my friends and family have questions about their pets, then I'm very honored that they call me to sort of at least tell them, to rush to the hospital. Yesterday, it was like I was on my way to check on the cat. So, you know what, it was an interesting degree, definitely. I mean, it was sort of a natural choice in some ways, because I was so interested in animals. And we did have to, in Russia back then, I went to school in '92, mind you. We went to veterinary school, and it was right out of high school. So you did have to learn everything from bees to cows, and so it's because it was predominantly oriented towards agricultural animals. Help me out here. So it was both difficult and fascinating. I have to say, in Russia back then, it wasn't necessarily a prestigious degree, because everybody wanted to go, it was '90s, everybody wanted to go to economy, to law, so it was a little bit different. But I definitely learned a lot through that degree, and being attuned to, a being that cannot communicate with you, and really sort of feeling them, and being sensitive and empathetic. I think that taught me quite a bit. So, well, anyway, I want to like learn biology. So switch from psychology, learning about human beings, to sort of also learning about the ecosystems and terrestrial systems. I love it. It's a huge thing. So how did the switch happen and why?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm glad you actually asked me you in advance, because I was like, I don't remember that process. I had to think back a little bit. I do remember now though. So I was able to recall what it was, and it wasn't, I think, a straightforward path. And I think that's maybe less typical for people in the sciences. When I went to Tufts, I felt like all of my other fellow graduate students had known for a long time that this is where they would end up. And for me, it wasn't that case at all. So, after I graduated with a degree in psychology, I went and I worked at a program for a while. And it was very tricky. And I think I realized that it was going to be hard for me to do it long term, because I tend to, be a little bit of a sponge. I think some people tend to be like that for other people's emotions. And I was like, this isn't going to be good for me, and that's not going to be good for other people either. So what else should I be doing? And so I actually, my brother suggested that we go walk the Camino de Santiago, which is this several 100-mile long walk across the north of Spain. It's a religious and spiritual pilgrimage that people take, and goes way back in history. And we did. We took a month in the summer to walk it. I don't recommend walking it in the summer. It's very, very hot. But I spent the whole day walking. So, and because it was so hot, we would start at 3 a.m. So we would get up at 3 or 4 and we'd start walking in the dark, and then we'd walk till about maybe 2 o'clock, and then we'd stop for the day. And,
how many miles is the whole stretch?
I can't recall offhand, but it's long. Yeah. So you're doing a lot. You're walking for probably 8 to 10 hours a day. And what's that?
How many days?
It can be, you can do as much of it as you want. We did it for 30 days. So, which is sort of the tradition. Yeah. So you're on that trail, and that gives you a lot of time to think. You can spend some time talking to people, but it's a lot of time to think. And so I did spend a lot of time thinking, and that I think was really very good for me. And so, as I was walking, I decided, I think I want to go into nursing, because it seems like a natural extension of, my psychology degree, and the program I had been in had nurses working there. And I was like, okay, like, that seems like actually a really good job, and I'd enjoy it. And so originally I went back to school. I was doing post-bac classes thinking that I would become a nurse. And then I
was in school, or was it?
No, I was just doing some prereqs, so that I could do that. And then I took a biology class, and I was like, and we got to the part about plant molecular biology, and it just completely blew my mind, like in a way that I'd never experienced before. And sort of simultaneously, having been on the Camino de Santiago, I had sort of a renewed love of the outdoors. And so I started hiking again. And I actually started my own women's hiking group, and we would go up to New Hampshire, and we'd go hiking. And in the rain, and it's New Hampshire, we go hiking in the ice and the snow and the rain. You can't not hike because of bad weather there. It's not like the Bay Area. It's beautiful all the time here. You just, if you're going to go out, you have to go out and whatever. So except
California, right?
Right. Except for thunder and lightning, that was sort of we wouldn't do that. But otherwise, you have to go out in bad weather too. And it was incredible. And so I realized, let's you know, I think I actually am really interested in ecology and biology. And so I took my prereq so I could apply to graduate school, and I did, and I ended up at Tufts. So that's sort of the how I got there. Now, are you, oh, sorry, go ahead.
You were talking about empathy and how you were as a sponge, you know, absorbing, and then thinking about going into nursing. I mean, nursing is just such a, you know, you have to be with people and you have to, you know, absorb through their potentially sometimes very difficult times. So it's interesting. Yeah, the transition. So yeah. I'm very happy that you use biology, and now, you know, in the whole environmental sort of movement. So, you know, and then talking about your sort of education at Tufts, and also what I learned, very diverse school. So that's obviously very exciting. I sort of sustainability and environmental protection is such a huge field. And you mentioned that biology, learning about plants, was something that was very exciting. So is that something that, you know, why you decided to go into this whole field of work of environmental protection? Or what are the sort of passions, you know, what keeps you up at night, what wakes you up in the morning, that just really drives you in that, you know, in that field, aside from children waking you up?
I know, yeah. What wakes me up in the middle of the night? Young children, usually now. It keeps me up. You have to qualify that statement. That's a great question. I mean, I think that there's a lot of things that kind of come together all at once, you know. So I just genuinely love the science, and there's nothing that will ever keep me from loving that. And I think that that's something that I feel very strongly about. But I think one of the things that it's always been really important to me is advocacy, and, you know, how can you use the science to really, you know, make very thoughtful change. And that's kind of where the psychology background comes in, right? Because it's like, well, if you want to make change, you need to include people. And how do you work with people? How do you think about people? How do you organize people, and all those kinds of things? So it's sort of a coming together, you know, working here at the Sierra Club is a coming together of all the things that I love. I love advocacy. I love nature. I love the science, and periodically I get to really dig in on it. So that's really cool. And I love the people. I think the people are just awesome. And I love thinking about, you know, working with the many different personalities and many different intentions and goals and all those kinds of things. I think it's really cool. And so I actually can't think of a better fit for me personally. So that's kind of a nice thing about being here, is that it just feels like all these different pieces that didn't necessarily have a cohesive fit just really fit nicely here at the Sierra Club. I don't know if you know, as chair, it's sort of a different experience that of a director, but I'm wondering if you have sort of a similar experience, because you do have the science background, but you're also, you know, working in policy with policymakers, and so you have all these different pieces. You know, what's your sort of sense of it?
Oh boy. Well, thank you for that. Yes, I think that Sierra Club, and I want to ask you a few more questions, because it is, you know, we are with Sierra Club. I hope a lot of members of the Sierra Club and people who are supporting our mission and vision are tuning in and going to be watching this conversation. Yeah, Sierra Club, I have to say, it does sort of, for me, I very much agree. It does bring together so many different interests and so many different components. You know, working with people, anywhere you go, you have to navigate different personalities, different interests. And within Sierra Club, of course, we have a lot of leaders who are very passionate, who are incredibly knowledgeable, who, you know, been advocating for issues for many years or just starting. So navigating all of those, you know, interests and perspectives is very interesting, sometimes challenging. I'm not gonna, you know, make a Sure. I mean, we all know when we work with people, it can be challenging sometimes, but it's also interesting. You learn something, and what I noticed that it makes me sort of challenges me to always be aware and always sort of question myself, not question, but sort of think about what is the goal, what is the intention, where am I coming from, who I want to be in the conversation, in my sort of leadership style, etc. So, but yes, I'm very excited because we're working on so many impactful campaigns, and this is something that I wanted to ask you, sort of maybe because Sierra Club is just so, we cover, because we have a lot of interests that are brought by volunteers to the chapter. So I wanted to ask you, what are your sort of highlights, the campaigns that maybe you are just the most excited or you want to highlight as a chapter work? So as a director. Yeah.
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I think, how do you pick of your children which is your favorite, right?
Just highlights, couple of highlights.
They're all wonderful. I think, you asked me the question, what keeps you up at night? And I think that, I was thinking about that. And for me, I actually am not kept up at night by things that worry me. I actually wake up in the middle of the night and all I can think about is opportunity. And I think the cool thing about being here is that all I see all the time is opportunity. We have this incredible volunteer leadership. We have a really activated membership. And even if they're not a member, we have a very activated community in the Bay Area who's very interested in the environment in a way that I think is, probably the highest in the country. It's just so amazing to see how engaged people are here. And we have a really solid political force here that's really interested in moving environmental issues forward. And there's a lot of pride here at the chapter, but also at the Bay Area about being the first in the country to push forward environmental initiatives, and that is something that if another part of the country gets there first, I can hear people grumbling about it. We should have done that. So I think that is an area of pride. So, those are the things that I think I'm like, oh my gosh, there's almost too much opportunity. The things that I think our chapter, that I'm very excited about, of course, as a 501c4, we are in a unique position to really vet candidates for their environmental record that very few other organizations can do. And I think that is a unique, amazing quality of the club. And I think the chapter does an excellent job at it. So that is something that I feel, especially going into the 2020 election, I feel very enthusiastic about. And of course, I love how engaged the chapter is on energy issues, whether it's trying to phase out, dirty energies or promote renewable energies. I think we do a lot of work on both of those angles. And of course, our advocacy, current and then historical, of preservation of open space, to the point where there is just not a part of the Bay Area that our chapter that you walk through that the chapter has not had its fingerprint on. Yeah. And I think that that's such a cool thing. Is I'll be in a park and I'll see a little, on a rock, a little sign saying like, this park, was brought to you by, it'll be a couple names. And of course, the Bay chapter is in there too, because we do such great work on that. So I could go on and on. We work on water issues. We work on transportation and housing issues. There's so many great things we do. And I think what's so unique about the club, and then our chapter in particular, is by having this really strong volunteer leadership, we're able to do so much more than other nonprofits that are like us, because we can really activate people to take the lead, which is just such a cool thing.
Well, and yes, thank you for that. I agree with you, absolutely. And just a little plug in. I mean, the SF Bay chapter is one of the biggest chapters of the Sierra Club in the nation. We about 35,000 members in San Francisco, Marin, Contra Costa, and Alameda counties. So we're very much involved in the Bay issues and open space. So yes, I very much agree with you. Very important work. So thank you for that. And thank you for leading the chapter.
It's funny, I see it as supporting, but I appreciate the leading too, because I think that, you know, again, what's unique is that, you know, at other organizations, it really would be the director who's the visionary and sets the course and so on. And I think what's so great about the Sierra Club is it has this volunteer leadership component where, you know, it's not just about one person. And I think that that's incredibly important if you want to get community engagement.
I have to say, I mean, I want to highlight, I just so appreciate your wisdom, and you are very much thinking not only in the moment, but strategically, and sort of not only deep, but wide. You know, what are the things that we need to think about? And this has been just so helpful, because especially in times like we are experiencing now, I think putting several minds together and really being, you know, grounded and balanced, and being able to sort of see in the future, and it's like, well, maybe we should communicate this, maybe we should, you know, take care of that. So it's been incredibly helpful, honestly.
I'm glad to hear that.
You know, again, our chapter staff is just absolutely, I'm in awe always, because it seems like I said that in our meetings that I feel like people almost feels like didn't skip a beat. And actually volunteers also, I'm like, everybody's still pushing and emailing and working on campaigns. So it's been incredible. So one thing, definitely, you know, talking about environmental science, I have to pull up my cheat sheet a little bit here, because it's not like I could, you know, remember the names of the publications that you did. But I have to say that it's like the names itself is like, I'm talking, you know, talk about marketing and messaging. I was like, my goodness, the titles themselves just make me want to read those papers. And forgive me, I didn't get a chance to do it yet, but I want you to.
No, you don't need to.
A little bit about the publications that stood out for me. How to teach climate change to a conservative community. That's one that I want particular to know about. You know, the other ones: fear, ridicule, danger. Is it safe to be a climate scientist? Choose controversies wisely. So it's not easy subject. So I was like, you know, I wanted to talk in particular about how to teach climate change to a conservative community, because I think especially now in the election year, and you highlighted, and I want to touch on that a little bit later also, because it is a serious year. In 2020 election year, we're doing a lot of work in the electoral politics as a Sierra Club. But we do have, despite popular belief, we do have a lot of people even within Bay Area who are not, you know, identify themselves as progressive. So I think it's a very unique perspective, and also I think valuable lesson how to talk to people from all communities. And so any highlights, you know, 3 or 4 points that you can, you know, teach us how to talk to somebody.
Yeah, golly, in 30 seconds or less.
Have a little bit more, but
yeah, it's a tricky subject. So my previous job, it might be helpful to give you the context of those articles. My previous job was working for the National Center for Science Education, and they're an organization that's devoted to supporting teachers and educators to teach socially contentious but scientifically accurate science. So their origins were in evolution science, and people are probably more familiar with my former director, Eugenie Scott, than they are with the National Center for Science Education. But Jeannie led the organization for 30 some odd years, and people call her the evolution lady. She was also a PhD, and she would lead the organization in ensuring that creationism was not taught in public schools, but evolution was. And that was a tricky, hard-fought battle that she engaged in, including at one point ending up in the courts as well. And there's a really great documentary on PBS about it that I can't recall the name of right now, but,
I had an idea to maybe put some resources, after
that. Yeah, I'll look it up later. But where they talk about that whole court case as well. And really, I think we owe a debt of gratitude to Jeannie and her organization for, the fact that kids across America do learn about evolution, and they don't learn that, kangaroos hopped off Noah's Ark and hopped all the way to Australia, which is one version of creationism.
What was the time? Because I think it's also relevant for people, because now it's sort of a non-brainer in the many communities, but we're talking 40, 50 years ago, right?
No. This is within the last 20 years.
Okay, well, even though, yeah.
I'm like, what year is it? But I mean, it was an issue that continued to occur when I was there, and I was there 4 years ago. So I was brought on to work on another socially contentious issue, which is climate change. And there's a lot of parallels. So, in the case of evolution, Jeannie would have to go into very conservative communities. And so she and the organization itself demonstrated an exceptional amount of patience, but also a really solid, this is the science, how can we support educators to teach the science, and that sort of thing. And so similarly, there's a couple different things that you can do in communities that don't necessarily, they confuse the science with the politics. It tends to be where the issues are. So trying to kind of break those apart for people was a really important part of our work. And one way we sort of do that with climate change is, find resources in people who were conservatives, and really highlight, their understanding of the science of climate change, and really try to, when a teacher was in a community where they were being pressured by the principal or the superintendent to not teach climate change, or teach, that the sun is causing it, or, something like that, or it's natural in some other fashion, it's not related to humans, that, what are the resources we can give you? Like, can we call up the local university and have a bunch of scientists show up? those kinds of things. So yeah, I mean, I imagine it's probably as much of an issue now as it was when I was working there, but it was definitely a lesson in people and the intersection of people and science. So there's another piece there.
Did you have to actually go into meetings with, more conservative members of community and have the conversation with them, or did you prepare the sort of background materials? What was the
majority of our work was trying to prepare community members to do that. And I think that that's something that's very similar to my work now is, thinking about folks in the community. So you're not charging in and being like, you need to do this, you need to do that, and so on, but rather, we would go to, the science teachers or the parents of the kids who were in the school or whatever, and just say, here are the resources we have, here are the people we can pull in for you, what are the things that we can do, and having them be able to be the voices for their community. And I think that that's always very important too.
So it sounds like you did a lot of coaching sort of on how to, So what, I'm interested, because we also in the Bay chapter and the Sierra Club as a national organization, we are learning and really being deliberate about making sure that our message and our communication style and how we approach different communities, resonate with those communities and people from different walks of life. So what I'm curious about that what are the three things that if you were coaching me, I'm going to a community meeting, what are the three things that you say, Olga, do X, Y, and Z, and maybe don't do X, Y, and Z if you have those pointers, because I'm curious.
Yeah. What I tend to do especially if I'm going to a meeting for the first time, is I get out my pad of paper and my pencil and I close my mouth, and I listen and I look around the room and I take notes on who's saying what. I take notes on the dynamics of the people there. And, I might probe with some questions and that sort of thing. But I think that's, especially when you're, this was the case when I worked at the National Center of for Science Education. It's the case now where I'm at a big green, sometimes what people refer us to, is that, if you go into a community meeting and you kick down the door and you say, hey, this is the way it's going to be, that's going to land so well.
I'm being sarcastic.
That's going to go over great. So yeah. And then from there you can, you can circle around and say, hey, have you thought about this? Here are some resources. Here are the things that, we could support here, even, based on our experience, this is what we would recommend. I think that's really important. I think that's something that the volunteers are very good at too, but sometimes we also need to, remind our volunteer leaders and remind our staff about, and remind everybody is that, even if you don't feel like you're coming in with, a giant flag that you're planting in the room, you have to be really careful about, your approach, because people might see it that way. And so being very thoughtful about that. And I do try my best. I don't know. I can't say that I always succeed because of course I have lots of opinions about everything. So, but that is, I think it's a good model to follow.
That's what I was saying before. I think we all, have at the Sierra Club, especially a lot of opinions, but this is very valuable advice. Thank you, Minda. And I observe you actually doing exactly that. So you practice what you are, sharing with us. I definitely, so very helpful. And I'm constantly learning. I was like, Olga, listen, give it a chance to speak. So it's just a constant practice, and we're not perfect, but I think you definitely do that. Well, there are a few questions that, there are a lot of questions I would love to answer, ask you. I was wondering if there's something that you would have wanted me to ask you, and I just didn't yet, because we're getting towards the end of the hour, and something that you would like to share. Story.
Sure. I actually, maybe it's a question that we both could answer. How's that? We're in the Bay chapter, at the San Francisco Bay chapter, and you had mentioned that we cover Marin, and San Francisco and the East Bay, which is Alameda and Contra Costa counties. And, I grew up outside of Boston. I spent a good chunk of my life there. And moving out here, I am just, every day, my jaw drops with how unbelievably beautiful it is. And it's hard to even imagine, but I'll take a walk around the block and it's gray outside, and that makes everything even more beautiful. I've never experienced like anything like that before, where a gray day can actually make flowers pop that much more. And so I know it's hard to choose, but if there's one spot in our chapter area that you just have a really like thoughtful connection to, or something like that? You know, what is? I know it's so hard to choose because it's all amazing, but what would that one be?
For me also, oh boy. So for you, it's just walking around and that's admiring the nature and admiring how beautiful it is, right?
Well, I have one in particular I can share, and that'll give you time to think of your own. How's that?
Right. I want you to share.
So like I said, I think that they're all really amazing. There's one in particular that I feel particularly connected to, and that's the Berkeley Marina. And then there's several parks around that too. So I think it's the McLaughlin East Shore Park is there, and the Cesar Chavez Park is there too. And the history of that, of course, is it used to be a dump. I don't know if you knew that. Yeah.
That because it looks so amazing now.
I mean, that's kind of why I love it, is that the history of it is that it was a dump. And this is one of those places where the chapter's fingerprint is on it, because the chapter, along with, I don't want to exclude any other organizations because many people worked on this, but fought for a very long time to turn that area into the place it is now. And if you go there in the summer, you see that Berkeley holds its summer camps there, and it's overrun with children. And if you go there, you know, on the weekend, there's Adventure Playground, which is just this mind-blowing playground that I've never heard of anywhere else.
Don't go there now, but yes.
No, you can't go there right now. Yes, but where the kids build the playground. You know, they give the kids a hammer and nails and some wood, and they're like, get built. Yeah, I mean, it's so wild. And there's the beach, and then you can watch the boats going out and stuff like that. Of course, right now that's not happening. But it's one of the best examples, I think, of how you can really turn trash to treasure, literally. And it is one of the greatest assets in my mind in the area. And I live close by, so I'm able to go there quite often. And it's, you know, my hope here at the chapter that I could be part of something like that in the future, is that my work here could help create more of those kinds of things in the future. So that's mine. Okay, so what's yours?
You actually answered my next question, because I was going to ask you, and I'll give you mine too. You know, I was going to ask you sort of what are the things that you want to leave as a legacy. I know that's a huge question, but you sort of answered that a little bit, and that's a great aspiration also. Oh boy. Something that I would like to share that, well, you know, to your point, I grew up in St. Petersburg, Russia, which is an amazingly beautiful place, and the wilderness there is also amazing. And to your point, I was walking in the neighborhood in Oakland yesterday and taking pictures of bees on dogwood flowers, you know, and just the joy of observing nature and constantly been in awe of, oh my God, I haven't seen this flower, I haven't seen this, you know, bumblebee, and the lighting, and it's amazing, especially of course now it's difficult times, but looking outside, you know, and seeing even just the sky and the greenery is amazing. I think it's so uplifting. So, but wrapping it up, I can share more, but I want to hear you. So what are the 3 things that you want to leave your children with, and by extension, you know, all the volunteers and people who are listening to, sort of, those are the important points that you want to leave us all with?
Oh gosh. What are the 3 most important points? You know, I think
you know,
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a lot of gratitude for the people and the environment here in the Bay Area. And I feel like, but I also hope people have gratitude for it here too. That, you know, we're so fortunate to live in just, I think, the most beautiful part of the world. And to have such an activated citizenry who wants to make it more beautiful each day. I think that is just feeling really optimistic and fortunate about that. I think is the first thing. And I think that the next thing, maybe it's just two things. And the next thing is that I think, you know, it's really important that we have hope and acknowledge, you know, all the incredible work that's happened in the past and realize that we can continue it even if it's all online, you know, even if it changes things, that that we have, there's still opportunity and there's still work to be done. And I'm just so looking forward to doing it with everybody. I think it's going to be great.
Thank you so much. And you know, you mentioned online. It's interesting how I'm getting comments from so many sort of on Facebook. I see even from you, you know, that some things, some holidays that people are in different parts of the country or even in different parts of the world. Now people is like, oh my God, I didn't celebrate it with my family because I never got a chance to be there, you know, travel across the country. And now it's like, oh, I had a celebration with everybody on the screen.
Yeah.
Not the same. You cannot hug and, you know, really embrace each other, but it's interesting that people actually learning a lot about each other. You know, so I appreciate you seeing an opportunity in something that seems sometimes to be a little bit of a difficult time. So appreciate that. Well, I feel honestly that I could continue the conversation because we've been touched on the, you know, you touched a little bit on the political, you know, advocacy, which is obviously important in 2020. So I feel like we need to have another conversation on
We'll
this.
do it again. We'll do it again.
Well, thank you so much, Minda. It's been a pleasure, and I just so count my blessings, honestly, working with you. So appreciate you and appreciate
Thank
all
you.
the work that you've done for the chapter and for the community. So thank you so much, and
Thank you.
appreciate.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And thank you everybody for tuning in, for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot. And I hope you tune in to our next conversation next week with our amazing also Chance Catrano, who is the vice chair of the chapter. So you'll hear from a different perspective of a volunteer. So yeah, very exciting. All right.
Well, thank you.
You.
Bye.
Bye.